Hey, and welcome back to the number one podcast in the world, the Cellarcast episode. Why are the fucking audio levels weird? No. I'm gonna tap this microphone now. Alright, that looks like the right thing. What episode are we on? 100 and, God damn it. 18, we're on 118. That really threw me off. I'm not gonna re-record it. I get freaked out. I'm gonna turn the recording level down a little bit so I'm not blowing the audio levels out when I talk. What was I talking about? Right. Wow, that was a really frazzled way to open that. I'm actually feeling pretty relaxed and calm today. I want to thank everybody real quick for 5,000 subscribers on the main channel. That was really cool. That was fun. I've been feeling... I'm like halfway through the video making process right now. That's why there's no video last month. And it's really long, and it's a lot longer than I thought it was going to be. And like halfway through the process, I woke up one day and I kind of looked at the ceiling and I was like, I feel burned out. I feel burnt out. I was listening to a thing about burnout. I don't know. So a lot of people assume that burnout is just when you work really hard. And that's partially it. But apparently, psychologically, what burnout really is it's a prolonged period of time where the effort you're expending is not being rewarded in a way you feel is proportional. You're working a lot for comparably little. And when you do that for enough time, your brain is like, this fucking sucks ass. You are not getting enough of the positive chemicals out of this process. This is a bad idea. It was funny because I was in a kind of a bit of a burnout funk when that happened, when I hit that milestone. And I think that actually helped me a lot. I woke up the next day and I felt like a lot more refreshed. That was nice. And I'm feeling better now, and I'm ready to get back into making the video. I'd like to maybe make 2 videos in October. I don't know how that's gonna go, but I'd like to. Anyway, I'm just talking a bit about my week, I suppose. I just took a couple days to not do anything, which I can do because I can make my own schedule. And now I'm ready to get back on that horse. There's no segue into this because we don't have any questions from last time. So I'm just gonna start talking about Titanfall 2 because man, I was playing that this week and last week. Hang on, yeah, this last week, man, when you're excuse me. When you're feeling kind of burnt out and you don't want to do anything all day, there's like a 6-hour Titanfall 2 session waiting for you right there. That game is fucking fun. That game is really good. That was really nice to come off of a relatively disappointing multiplayer experience with BattleBit. Straight into Titanfall 2, which feels wonderful. I already really liked the way the game played just from the single player campaign, and I enjoyed that a lot. But digging into the multiplayer for how much time have I put into it now? I want to say the single player took me 6 hours, let's just say. I'm currently sitting at 30 hours. So I've invested quite a bit of time into that multiplayer. Yeah, so much fun stuff in there. Moving around feels wonderful. The maps are designed in this way where they're really big, but you move around so quickly that I never felt like I was really constrained by how large they were. Once you kind of figure out the flow of the game and you learn to read the map a little bit to tell you where the combat is happening, it's not too hard. I was surprised. I thought the multiplayer games would be bigger. They're about 6v6. I think the default is a 6v6. So actually, for how large the maps are, fairly intimate feeling game. But there's a lot going on. It's an interesting balance. There's not a lot of players. There's only 12 players in a match total, right? But it feels busier for a couple of reasons. Number one, it's really fast. Everything about this game is fast. Like, you move fast, you die fast. The time to kill is like really quick in this game. And you respawn fast. You're back in like a second, like maybe 2 seconds. There's also so like you're just seeing a lot of stuff. You get like the default you get like a utility ability that's on like a utility ability. It's on your mouse wheel. At least for me it is. I don't know what it's on. I think they call it the tactical or whatever. There's like a couple different tactical things. There's like a knife that you can throw, and it sends out like a sonar wave that scans nearby enemies, and you can like wall hack them. There's like a shield you can put up. You can go invisible. But the one they start you out with, by default in like the primary first like loadout that you have, is the grappling hook. And God, it is fun to use. It is fun to hook on to stuff, and the cooldown is very generous. And you can keep it keep it hooked onto stuff for a second, swing around and jump off a wall, and man, you're always seeing new stuff. It's never too much. You're never just spending. You aren't usually spending time just looking around for stuff to do. It's very easy to get to the action. Second thing that I really liked about it was, there's these like I remember this was a thing. Excuse me. I remember this was a thing. Way back, I was sort of reminded of it, that this game has these little like NPC soldier dudes for both teams who just kind of like drop in, and they're around, and their intensity or their strength scales up throughout the match. You can kind of it took me a while to understand the flow of a multiplayer match. So first of all, there's a bunch of different game modes, but the only one anyone queues up for and the only one you're going to find is attrition, which is just team deathmatch, where it's just you're trying to get to the point goal, which I think is different depending on the map. Might be wrong on that. My memory's not great on the specifics, but you're trying to get to the point goal, and you get points from doing a lot of things. You get points from obviously getting kills, from getting assists, from killing the little NPC enemies, from killing Titans, just like doing the stuff that you would naturally do, right? So those little enemies, the little fodder enemies, they're actually pretty important. The flow of the game is I've gotten a bit of a handle on it. You can kind of divide it into 3 categories. There's the first third, or the 3 phases. The first phase of the game is all just pilots. It's all just on the ground combat, because you have to build up a meter to call your Titan down, to call your Titan fall. So the build up is just like that's when there's like it's just the most basic. They're called grunts. They're called grunts, the most basic little soldier goons. And the weakest ones, like, they're never going to kill you, realistically. They're just there to, like, farm points. You get a little bit of points for killing each of them. You build up your Titanfall meter, and then kind of around the time... I don't know if there's, like, a specific time that it usually happens around, but at some point in the game, in the match... people will start to get their Titans built up, depending on, how close the game is. If one team is just stomping immediately, it's probably going to happen faster because they're going to be building up their Titanfall faster. And then once the Titans enter the picture, they radically change the dynamics of the game. They did a really good job. The devs, Respawn, they did a great job at making the Titans feel impactful and making them feel like, oh, when a Titan comes down, it's like serious. If you're not in another Titan yourself, you're on a serious uphill battle. They can kill you in like essentially one shot from their weapons. So whichever team kind of maintains sort of like a Titan advantage for the longest, you can, if you get 2 or 3 people in Titans around the same time, and you just like, you could just oppress the opponents. If you travel in like packs and their positioning isn't very well coordinated, and they don't have Titans of their own, you can keep them down for a long time, and you can keep it like 3 Titans to 1 for a while. And I noticed that's where the game really feels like it's decided in that second phase, where, first phase is just kind of, okay, who's going to get it, right? Who's going to get the Titans online first? Second phase is like, okay, shit. You hit a point where you're like, damn, I feel like I'm walking around and these things are just everywhere and they're killing me fast. And I don't have too much that I can do about it. And then you look up at the score and they're like double the score and you're like, ooh, okay, all right. That's happened a lot in my games that are, the more one-sided ones where you're like, I have a feeling I know how this is going to go. And it's very difficult. It's very difficult to catch up, at least in my experience. I'm not very good. I'm not good enough to be like, I'm going to carry the whole team. But I could do all right in some games. I try to finish not last on the scoreboard. And I usually avoid it. I can usually avoid dead last. Just the third phase then is when like it's either when like the game's been totally decided or it's pretty close. It's usually pretty close. Those are kind of the two situations. And if it's totally decided, you're like, yeah, not too much I can do. But if it's kind of close and it's a little more exciting, that's the point in the game where the strongest NPCs start spawning in. You get what are they called? Like predators or something? I forget what they're called. They're like bigger robots, and they can do like serious damage to Titans. They can actually seriously hurt a Titan. And they're also worth a lot of points if you kill them. And then at that point, I don't know, that's where stuff gets the most dangerous, and where it might just be, if it's close, you can end up in a situation where it's like 4 to 5 Titans on each team, like just at one time. And then I also like how for the losing team, losing in points, the game doesn't end automatically. When you lose, there's an epilogue, as it's called. And the epilogue is about a minute-long sequence where you have to find, there's like a point on the map where like an evacuation like jet is gonna touch down, and you got to get to it. The losing team has got to get to it, hop into the jet. You'll kind of like zoom, teleport into it once you're close enough, and then it takes off after about, I want to say 30 seconds. And then the opponents are trying to like keep as many people as possible. The winning side is trying to keep as many people as possible from getting to the ship. And then also they can destroy the evac ship, which is fun. Hey, you want to know something that's fun? Crushing people with a Titan, with your Titanfall. It hasn't gotten old yet. I've done it a couple times, and it's so funny. And it's happened to me, and I can't even be mad. It's so funny. Like, when you hit V, you hit the button to trigger your Titanfall, and it starts dropping, and you see the marker on the ground, and you see like an enemy Titan, and they're like, they haven't noticed. You're like, oh yeah. And boom! It's so sick. It's so funny because it kills them instantly. I'm pretty sure if a Titan drops on anything, it kills it instantly. Because it's to be just this stupid. It's so funny. It's so much fun. What was I talking about? Oh yeah, the epilogue stuff. That stuff feels. That's like okay. That takes a bit of the edge off of losing a game, because if you can at least get to the evac ship, if you can at least do that, then and evacuate successfully, it's like okay, you got a small victory, you got a Pyrrhic victory, and not really. That takes some of the sting out of losing, some of the bitterness. I don't know how many metaphors am I going to come up with for this. I don't know, man. The game's just fun as hell. The progression is very consistent, and that feels nice. I haven't played a shooter that has that much progression. I guess, I don't know. TF2 is weird because you just kind of randomly unlock stuff at different times, and a lot of times it's like stuff you've already unlocked. And yeah, progression in that game feels extremely lackadaisical. In Titanfall, it's much more like clear. And you've got all these weapons, and it's very clear at what point, like, you gotta get a certain amount of kills with every gun to level it up. Excuse me. You get, like, every and all the level ups you get from various things that you're doing throughout the match then count towards your pilot leveling up, like your actual, I guess, your account. And then that will unlock further things for you, and then undoing things for like your Titan. That's a separate. Every one of the different Titans levels up at a different rate as you play them. Not at different rates, but they level up separately. You unlock a lot of cosmetics. I feel like every time been playing a game, again, I'm like, I've put in about a little under 30 hours into the multiplayer, and I am still unlocking new stuff practically every game, practically every match, assuming that I don't kind of spread out the weapons or the Titans that I'm using. And I still feel like I'm getting stuff. And then I try out a new gun. Man, the guns in this game are fun. I've had multiple times, I think I mentioned this with the single player, but I've had multiple times where I've started using a gun, and I was like, I like this. This is a fun gun to use. Right now, I'm very partial to, I believe it's the R97, which is this kind of low damage, but it's insanely high fire rate. Like, what is it? I think it's a light machine gun. I don't know. And it makes this, it carries a lot of ammo, and it fires a lot of bullets, and the sound makes me feel like I'm the one dying. It is really fun to use. I like it a lot. I don't know, is there anything else about the game that's just it's a great multiplayer experience. I am very pleased with my Titanfall experience so far. I thought the campaign was great. I thought the campaign was great just on its own. I was talking to someone, I brought it up in a Discord server when I finished the game, and someone said, yeah, honestly, I think that game is worth it just for the campaign alone. And I'm like, yeah, honestly, that's really solid. But then the multiplayer, like, it's still fun when I'm not winning. I lose a lot of games. And the games that I win, I'm usually not the reason we win, right? But it's still fun. Like, just playing the game is fun. And killing people is fun. Like, it feels good to like, swing around and see someone and, like, oop, and then they're just dead in, like, half a second. It's awesome. It feels great. Yeah, I don't know, man. It's really good. Big two thumbs up. Big thumbs up. Big thumbs up from Taigen. I guess if you prefer a slower paced shooter experience, something more tactical, it's probably not for you. Or it might not be. You can still try it out. But for me, as someone who likes to play games where I feel very empowered, like I have a lot of stuff that I can do and a lot of options at my disposal, and it's just kind of fun to do things and move around, It's really hitting the spot, and I'm having a great time with it. I highly recommend. Let's see. There's a quick news story that I don't know. It I feel like I didn't have as big of a reaction to it as some people did. Jim Ryan is leaving Sony as their CEO of the PlayStation brand. Sony Interactive Entertainment, I think is... I don't know. I forget how they split their things up. But yeah, Jim Ryan announced his departure. He's going to be leaving the company like next year, I think. But he's announcing it like a couple months in advance, like 8 months in advance. And which, is enough for them to find a successor and all that. Some people were like, yeah, fuck that guy, good riddance. I don't hate Jim Ryan. I think a lot of people, the people who dislike Jim Ryan, I think most of them dislike him for the fact that he de-emphasized the Japanese development side of PlayStation and really leaned into the Western market, which is like, the thing with Jim Ryan is that he seemed like a very safe CEO and not a very adventurous leader. He made very safe, sensible business decisions. You know what I mean? Like, honestly, he kind of... I totally forgot. I didn't realize he only became the CEO in 2019. I could have sworn it was longer. But no, he was the president of the European branch of the company. And then in 2019, he ascended to CEO over the PlayStation stuff, the PlayStation dynasty. And to be honest, he kind of inherited a company in the lead. I get kind of a sense of like resting on his laurels, kind of a feeling out of post Jim Ryan PlayStation and pre Jim Ryan PlayStation. Honestly, I mean, let's be real. All the PS4 had to do was not piss people the fuck off, and they would have won the 8th console generation by a landslide anyway. Dude, hey, if anyone's in a business class, let me know. Are they teaching about Don Matrick yet? Are there lesson plans using him as a cautionary tale? It is insane to me. I like to think about this sometimes. It is crazy to me how, by the end of the 7th gen, the PlayStation and the Xbox brands were pretty neck and neck. It was kind of exciting. Because there was this whole storyline. Oh, the PS3 started out really weak. All these problems. The 360 was in the lead the whole time. But by the end, the PS3 really came back. Had a strong library. Made a lot of good decisions. Releasing new, cheaper models and all that. And all these great exclusive games. And he was like, oh man, what's the next generation going to be? And then in the span of literally a week, Don Matrick fucked Xbox for like a decade. That was like 2013 or 2014. It's been almost 10 years since he said, yeah, we have an offline device, it's called the Xbox 360. Could you imagine? I love how Jeff Keighley is the one asking him that question. It's like, what is this, like a fucking TV show with like the same cast of characters? I love how Jeff Keighley's just randomly places. Remember when he was on Fox News to defend the Mass Effect 3 that it wasn't like a fucking porn simulator for babies, marketed to babies? That was funny. I was like, holy shit, that was him. I looked that video up for the games hearing video, the Senate games hearing video. There isn't a snappy title to that. Yeah. All that Sony had to do was just be relatively sensible and not the greediest pieces of shit, smug assholes in the world. And they had so much public favor just by not being Microsoft in that moment. And they rode that shit all the way to the bank. And to be fair, they put out some really big titles. They put in some work to build the PlayStation brand up. And like, PlayStation is the home for the mainstream casual, more casual-ish gamer, right? But it's not a very brave company, you know what I mean? I look at something like The Last of Us. I've never played The Last of Us. I haven't played Spider-Man. I just snapped all my magnets to my hitbox, which is like a metal box, and I didn't realize how loud it would be. Let's hear that again. The fuck are they talking about? Right. I haven't played like Spider-Man, PS4, or God of War, GAO or Gower. I haven't played any of those games, so I can't make a judgment on the quality or anything like that. I'm not gonna, so this is not a critique of that, but I will say they're not very brave games to make. They aren't they aren't brave games. What's a brave game to make? I totally had an example in my head of something that was like, this is like taking a chance. Doom 2016. That was a brave game to make. I think it's really easy to forget what the state of the like first-person shooter genre was in like 2015, 2016 when it came out. But because now it changed the landscape so much that now you kind of forget. You got to have a little perspective. Use your past, your history goggles, and think, man, yeah, there really wasn't anything like this out at this time that was of this quality. It was only that, and in the years following, that stuff was that smaller developers were like, oh shit, people like games like this. I want to make a game like that. Yeah, there's a market. Hang on, there's a market. Like, that's a very, I look at like there's the resurgence of horror games that happened in the last couple years, and I think like, Five Nights at Freddy's is not a particularly brave game to make, because it was just like, I don't think Scott Cawthon imagined that it's just a little game he was making. To put something like Doom 2016 out actually took like some courage, and to market it and to like actually put some weight behind it and to put that budget behind the game. That to me is like a brave decision to make creatively and commercially. Something like The Last of Us or God of War is not to say that they're bad games. It's just that like there is no world where someone looks like an executive looks at the pitch for The Last of Us and says, I don't know. Like, no, like, let's be real. Obviously, it's a very cinematic blockbuster type AAA game with serious performances and a serious story, and it's got zombies, which are popular right now, and it's got it has so many elements that are like, all of those things can be great in their own way. I haven't played it. They might very well be fantastic in their own way, but like, it's not. It's like a Marvel movie. Marvel put out fucking Ant-Man and the Wasp. They put out Ant-Man and the Wasp, and people went to see it. I'm pretty sure that movie made its money back. That's like, I don't want to compare The Last of Us to that, Should I compare Spider-Man because it's another Marvel thing? That's what I mean. Those are the kinds of decisions that Sony makes, at least under Jim Ryan. We're going to make games that have mass appeal, that have God damn it, who's the guy from Action Button? I always hear his name and then I forget his name. I don't want... I don't want the... What is this iPhone thing? Oh my god, what is the guy's name? He has like a really normal name and it's always escapes... Grrr. I'm so mad. It's the... Dude, I can see his face. Tim Rogers! There's fucking name is. Journalist guy. Now he's makes the YouTube that action button. Made like a 3-hour Doom retrospective. That was pretty interesting. I thought he makes weird videos. Highly pretentious, but strangely likable. That's how I would describe him. And I haven't watched his video on The Last of Us, but I saw someone quote it one time, and I'm like, damn, that's so true. Which was, The Last of Us was always going to be a great game because it has all the things that gamers say make great games. It has a serious story and great performances and cinema and all this stuff, right? I think that's very true. Also, partially, probably why I'm just not that interested in it. That's why I like playing weirder... I like playing weirder shit. I like playing weirder stuff. I'm making a video right now on some weird shit that did not do well. But it was interesting. I feel like that's like half my channel is weird shit that didn't perform well, but it's interesting. And it's not always good. It's usually pretty bad. Like, I make a lot of videos on weird games, and I'm usually pretty critical, and I don't want to be. It's just how I feel about the thing. That's just how I'm genuinely feeling. I go into a lot of things actually wanting and expecting to like them, and then I end up not liking them because I don't think it's very good. I actually have a lot of problems with it. All of the distaste and the whenever I'm critical on my channel, that's just how I really feel. That's how I really feel. I try to give games like props and kudos where I can, because I genuinely feel that way. How was I talking about? Oh yeah. I think it's really funny that I totally forgot last year Sony bought Bungie. I could have sworn, I'm not like a Destiny guy. I don't really keep up with that. And, Bungie, they make a game. They don't really make games, they make game. So they're just like not in the news if you're not playing Destiny. So I'm like, yeah, but I totally forgot about that they're owned by Sony. And let me turn down the volume a little, even more. So the Sony made this big pivot where they were like, we've been making these big blockbuster cinema games. We're going to shift into the future, which is live services. Oh, that always works out. It's not like every single successful live service game has been like an organic, homegrown community that took off because people just liked the game, or it had a built-in audience like Call of Duty or something like that was already playing multiplayer for a long time and stuff like that. Now let's just shift hardcore into games as a service. God, it's like a speculative market. It really is like a speculative market. You just can't invest in it. Well, you can, but it's not, you know what I mean. It's like a product. It's this golden calf. We're going to have this forever game that makes us all the money in the world forever. And we're going to have 10 of them, and everyone's going to spend their entire lives simultaneously playing all of them. We're going to fund a big spiritualist revival around the world so that people can ascend to the astral plane, and then they can split their consciousness infinite times so that they can grind for rare drops in Destiny, the Destiny Gaiden, and the Dunkling Burkidbaka. Well, I can't think of a name. And they're going to grind out ranked mode and watch esports. Infinite times in their astral bodies. They're going to buy. Imagine how much money we can get with microtransactions. Imagine buying a fucking CSGO skin with mind bucks. Bro, imagine winning the CSGO, like, imagine rolling a knife skin while you're ascending, while you're projecting your mind into space. Is that like heaven? Is that what Nirvana is? Do you die and you go to heaven? And you can't get into heaven until you roll an expensive knife skin? And you're like, whoa! It's like a spiritual orgasm. Oh, that's so fucking funny. I'm so funny. You better have been laughing at that. What the hell else? Right. So I think it's kind of funny that he last year when they bought Bungie, they were like, yeah, this is like the new direction. We've been making these like solo single player blockbuster AAA shebangs, and now we're gonna transition into live services, which is a very like proven, very rocky, difficult market to pin down. Because it kind of inherently oversaturates itself at a faster rate than any other type of game. And it also takes a ton of resources. It's like the biggest high-risk, high-reward thing ever. And we're just going to spit out like a dozen of them in the next couple of years. And then like a year later, our CEO is going to leave. What? Did he know this? Was this a little prank that he pulled? Was he like, I'm gonna fucking send this ship off towards the cliffs. I'm gonna jump ship and I'm gonna sail away on my little rowboat and I'm gonna go be a CEO at like some tech firm that freezes sperm for billionaires or something like that, like Eugenics Corp. What was I gonna say? I didn't have that much else to say about it. Jim Ryan's leaving PlayStation creates an interesting. I'm curious as to. I mean, that was a year ago. He's gonna leave in 2024. There's probably like at least 2 games in pre-production right now, at least, and they're at least in pre-production, right? I am very curious as to, because, you know, a lot of stuff that Jim Ryan probably mandated. He was only at the company for 5 years. 2019 was 5 years ago. Oh, no, I was a senior. Right? Hang on. 2019, 20, 21, 22, 23. Okay, fuck, it was 5 years ago. I was a senior in high school. Oh, Christ. Hey, I gotta shake my head first. I gotta shake that off of me. 5 years. He could have made a decision like literally 2 years ago, and we aren't gonna see that for another 5 years. We aren't gonna see where that turned out. Because game development, especially really big budget game development, is such a lengty process. And when you're talking about making these big live service games, some gas ass, takes a while. It's like longer, like 5 years at least, probably. That's like a typical development period for I feel like the biggest games take 5 years. And that's why Yandere Simulator is the biggest game ever, because it's taken 10 years, which is double that. It's going to be twice as big as GTA 5. And it's probably going to take even longer. It's going to be probably 20 years, because Yondev is going to have to finish it while he's in jail for grooming a child. Hey, you hear about that? There's some accusations. I don't know if they're true, but it wouldn't surprise me at all. Like, you look at that guy and how he acts and stuff, and you're like, you know that guy you hear about? Maybe not everyone has this guy, but you hear about him and you're like, someone's like, yeah, that guy was like he was slipping some shit into drinks. And you're like, oh, is that proven? And they're like, I don't know, like I heard it. And you're like, I mean, that clocks. I'm not like surprised. It wasn't like, I was going to say the Pope, but the Pope probably would do some crazy shit. I'm not going to go any further with that. It wasn't like I was going to say the Dalai Lama, but the Dalai Lama already did suck that kid's tongue off. Fuck. Can I think of like any uncorrupted religious leader, symbol of purity? Jesus. I don't think he fucked any kids, right? I don't think he covered up anyone fucking kids, right? I don't think he did that. I hope not. It was like finding out Jesus did it. You're like, God, Jesus? Shit, dude. Oh, come on. Not Jesus. What was I going to talk about? What was I going to talk about next? So I went over to Kat's and we were going to watch the entirety of Castlevania Nocturne because we spent so goddamn long watching and talking about the original Castlevania Netflix anime show, whatever you want to call it, that we were like, we gotta watch Nocturne now. We were gonna watch the whole thing. We only ended up watching half of it for a very funny reason. It's because Kat had like a couple days where she just had terrible allergies. One of them happened to be the night before I was coming over. So she got like zero sleep, and when I came over, I basically encouraged her to like please take some goddamn allergy medication, and we're gonna do some ghetto home solutions. We're gonna boil a pot of water, and then you're gonna fucking put your head over it and steam yourself out. And guess what? It worked, because I'm right all the time. And then we went to her bed, and she slept for like 4 hours. She slept for like 4 hours, and I couldn't fall asleep because it was the middle of the day, and I was like, I guess I'll just look at my phone for a bit, and I thought we were going to watch Castlevania. So it's like when she woke up, it was so funny. There was no like groggy waking up period. She was just catching up on all the sleep she missed because she couldn't fall asleep from her allergies. There was no groggy period. It was so funny. I heard like a stir, and then she sat directly up and looked at me completely wide-eyed, like she'd been traumatized by something. She looked like, oh my god. That's how she looked. I was like, oh, you're awake already? She's like, oh. She's like, you slept for like 4 hours. Oh my god. She slept for like the exact length of time that it would have taken us to finish the rest of the show. It was so funny. So we watched exactly half of it. Now, as I understand, the original creator of Castlevania is not involved in this show. How much of the writing staff is similar? I should have looked this up. Castlevania. Turn IMDb. Cast and crew. Excuse me. Let's see. The Nocturne. Let me pull up the other one. Castlevania. And is this all the whole series? Was it all written by... Is it created by Warren Ellis, the original? Warren Ellis, who also wrote, from what it appears, the entire series? Okay. Huh. Damn, that's pretty impressive. And then this was written by actually quite a few other writers. Clive Bradley, who has created by credits as well. Zodwa Nyoni, Temi O, and Testament. Who the fuck is Testament? What? Is that like Testament Guilty Gear? Did Testament Guilty Gear write? apparently this person wrote one episode. What is their fucking... They're just called Testament. They have 3 credits to their name. They were a composer on a short film called Still Still. They wrote an episode of Castlevania Nocturne, and then they played... they were credited under a different name on a series called Full Monty. The Full Monty, where they served as rap consultant. What the fuck? Who is this random person who just showed up, was a rap consultant, made a song, and then wrote an episode for a TV show? What? Anyway, it looks like the majority of... so all 8 episodes Clive Bradley worked on. He wrote 5 of the episodes. And then these 3 other people wrote 3 other episodes. I'm actually really curious which ones were written by who. Because we watched the first 4. We watched exactly half. And I wasn't really feeling the first 2 episodes. And the second 2, I liked a lot more. I'm actually really curious now. I'm going to read, let's see, who wrote... I'll just read the first 4. So episode 1, Clive Bradley. There's also the story editor, this person named Rachel Wardlow. I'm just going to consider the writers. 2, Clive Bradley. 3, Clive Bradley with Zodwa Neoni. 4 was Clive Bradley. Okay. Huh. Alright. So I wasn't feeling the first 2 episodes. This is somewhat, I guess, an adaptation of... Oh god, what is the title? Is it Dracula X? Rondo of Blood? Is that the one? Dude, Castlevania has the worst titles. Castlevania Richter. What game? Rondo of Blood. Wasn't this also called... Yeah. Akumajo Dracula X Chino Rondo. Demon Castle Dracula X Reincarnation of Blood is the fucking Japanese title. That's so crazy. This is, I guess, somewhat an adaptation. I've played this game on the PSP. I played, like, the remake on the PSP. And oh yeah, Shaft is in this. I remember Shaft. Isn't he? Yeah, I fucking love that his name is Shaft. You know that they thought that was like a cool sounding name, but you just think like his name like Dick? Or like that 70s blaxploitation series. Yeah. Shaft in Africa. That's a movie. Shaft's Big Score. Yeah. Who's the guy? Who plays him? Wasn't he also Steel? Richard Roundtree. What was he in? What else was he in? Let's see. He was in Maniac Cop. Well, he was in What Men Want. Go from Shaft to What Men Want. I swear he was in Steel. He was in Theodore Rex? That's crazy. He was in Seven? Just a bunch of random shit. He's in Speed Racer. He really is in a bunch of random shit. He is in Steel. Isn't he Steel? No, Shaq is Steel. Sorry, I'm dumb. Who does Richard Roundtree play in Steel? He's Uncle Joe. I don't know what the fuck that means. I haven't watched Steel. Anyway, we're talking about Castlevania, right? So this is like somewhat an adaptation of Rondo of Blood, which I remember playing, and I don't know, it's funny, because Castlevania, a lot of those side-scroller Castlevania games, you gotta really intuit to make a story out of those, I feel, because they're just side-scrollers, and you're just going through some levels. They do not have very involved stories. Symphony of the Night you could do, but, I guess sort of. Even Symphony of the Night's honestly it's pretty light in the story department. the hell's going on? So tentatively, just based off the first couple episodes, I am now interested in. I wasn't feeling the first two for a couple reasons. I think some of the voice performances were a bit weak. I think particularly the lady who plays Maria is a bit flat. She kind of says most things in a very... I don't know, it's like, yeah, flat. Like, she doesn't have a lot of emotion, which is weird because I feel like she's supposed to. The first thing that happens is, it takes place in the French Revolution, right? And there's some revolutionary peoples. There's some the main characters are all revolutionaries. And she's giving a speech about, like, the new whatever, and we're not going to be under the heel of the aristocrats or all that. And I thought she was just narrating something, or she was talking to herself, or she was giving some kind of narration, like to the audience or to no one in particular. And then you'd see, and she's giving this speech on like a literal soapbox to a group of people, and you're like, what? I would not rally behind this woman. It's a very weak speech. I wasn't really feeling it. In many ways, like the way that the dialogue is written, I don't know, it feels like the original series in a way that's hard to describe. I kind of wish characters spoke a little more period-like. Characters, they're a little too quippy, I feel, for the time period that it takes place in. Richter as well, I don't get too much, like... In the first two episodes, again, I didn't get too much character out of him. I think by the fourth episode, I was fairly on board with what was going on with him. Yeah, it takes a minute to get to interesting stuff. I wasn't exactly gelling with the main two characters, Richter and Maria. They didn't feel like they had that much... I don't know. They didn't feel like they had that much chemistry, and honestly, I think it's just because Maria's voice performance is a little weak. Because they have, like, some banter, and you're supposed to feel like they've known each other for a while, and I think that does come across. It just, like, I'm not, like, smiling. Like, when Trevor and Sypha would, like, talk shit to each other, or Alucard, right? That was, like, kind of fun. That was fun, and I felt, oh, these characters, like, kind of care about each other. I wasn't super sold on their relationship here. These two characters show up in like the second episode, I think, or the first episode, or one of them. They show up, Annette and Edward, and they're from they're from the Caribbean. Yeah, they're from the Caribbean. Annette is like an escaped slave from a sugar plantation, and Edward is an opera singer. And Kat said that they she watched the first two episodes, or she watched they live streamed for some reason on like whatever, like their YouTube channel, like the first two episodes or something. And she said she tapped out when someone started singing really poorly. And we got to that scene, and man, that scene really did not work for me. So Maria is doing this whole speech, right? And you notice one of the guys, he's some French fellow. Later on, he goes into a pub and he comes out, he's drunk, and he gets bitten by a vampire and he gets sucked up. And they go and they see that they go to visit, and all these four main characters go to visit. Basically, they spy on the nearby chateau where the aristocrats, who are all like vampire fuckers, are hanging out. And Maria sees this dude that she's known for a while, his corpse, and she's like, holy shit. And it doesn't really sound like that. I think me saying that is implied more emotion than I got out of the voice actress. I don't know. She's not selling it for me. And then, but it's like, okay, for the character, this is pretty traumatic. And they take his body, and I think that they bury him, and they have like a funeral, right? And Maria's mom, total smoke, Smoke Show had talked in a scene earlier about how her parents, she and her younger sister had been, they'd fled from Russia, I believe, because the Countess Elizabeth Bathory, who's like the big villain for this season, she like imprisoned them and all that, right? And you find out that she took her sister, and the mom went to go rescue her sister, and she was already like dead. She was already a vampire at that point. And it was like this horrible story. And they're having this burial, and opera singer guy Edouard I forgot what the specific line is, but he makes this comment where he's like, it's okay, you can't save everyone. Just like you couldn't save, just fucking turns to her mom out of the blue. Just like she couldn't save her sister. And I'd be like, what the fuck, dude? I've known you for a day. You're just gonna say that shit to me? Fuck you, dude. And then Maria starts crying because her friend is dead, and she's looking at his grave. And Edward he's like, you know what? This is a great time for me to start singing a song. Dude, I would be so pissed off if someone did that to me. If my friend of years died in this horrible way. He got fucking bitten by a vampire. I'm burying him. And then this fucking guy who just showed up out of the blue and is just all of a sudden just chum with everybody. Is like, did I get the order of events right? I might have gotten them slightly off. But that's how the scene goes. And then he just starts singing just this theater kid shit. Like, he has to make it about himself. Everybody focus on my beautiful voice. Oh, isn't this so sad? I'm so sad. I'd be like, dude, can you fucking for 1 second just like let me have a cry over this? Can you please just shut the fuck up? You never even met this guy. I'm going to make everybody pay attention to me. And then that guy dies. And I felt nothing. I was like, oh no, not Edward. Not that guy. I like Annette. I think she looks cool. Annette looks like a cool character. Her power is cool. She can control iron and shit. Her backstory is I thought was pretty interesting. I don't see many characters who are like, in a period piece, character who's like an escaped slave with this whole story of starting a slave revolt and all that, which happened all the time, by the way. Stuff happened all the time. Like, that stuff's interesting. She's cool. Like, I'm pretty sold on her character. I like her. Ooh. So, like, the sub-villain for this story, at least right now, what the heck is her name? She has some name that it's really hard to remember. Can you tell me what her name is? Is it Tara? I cannot remember. I think it's Tara. She shows up. She's like the sub-villain. And she's a representative for Elizabeth Bathory. I was like, so they keep referring to her. The whole thing is the vampire messiah is coming back. She's coming to Europe. And I was like, where do I know? Oh, right, fucking Jeddah from Darkstalkers. I was like, where do I know? I've totally heard the phrase vampire messiah. Or like, I think they even say vampire savior at one point. And I was like, oh, that's Darkstalkers 3. And I was like, what? I'm like, yeah, Darkstalkers 3 is called Vampire Savior. And because the villain of that game is Jeddah, he's called the Vampire Messiah. He's the Vampire Savior. That's his whole deal. Weird overlap. I don't know if that had anything to do with that, but whatever. And I'm pretty sure her name is Tara. I'm going to look up a picture of this. Hang on. I'm going to look this up, and it's going to say Death. Death is going to be one of the autofill results. Castlevania Nocturne Tara. No, it doesn't say Death. No, that's the mom. Who's the fucking lady? Who is that lady? What is her name? It's not Maria. It's not Annette. Not Edward. It's not Olrox? No, Olrox is the gay vampire. Olrox is that. Yeah, he's the fruity vampire. Mizrock? No, that's not that guy. What the hell is her name? There's like, I'm looking at like the full cast list. I can't find her. She's looking like Mal. I'm going to spend so long searching for this stupid character's name. I'm sure this is very boring. Castlevania. Oh wow, there's a lot of shit that comes up. Nocturne. Is it not on Mal? Are you serious? It's kind of surprising. Wow, it is legitimately not on Mal. Is the original? I don't... No, it is not on Mal. Huh. That's very curious. Anyway. Castlevania Nocturne cast. Why would she... Drolta Zuentes? Yes, her name is Drolta Zuentes. What the fuck is that name, dude? Anyway, when she showed up, Kat and I looked at each other. We went, whoa. Oh no. Uh-oh. I think she looked at me, and that was more of an uh-oh for me. I was like, oh, I like her. I like her. The episodes 3 and 4, you got to get a little bit of backstory stuff out of the way. It's a little bit front-loaded. But after that, and all that stuff is established, and it feels like things are happening in the plot. Like, when you end episode 4, something fairly interesting happens. And I'm like, okay, cool, I'm on board. I'm excited to see where this goes. And next week, I will get back to you guys with the complete thoughts on the season. Do I have anything else? Not really much to say about like the show itself. The animation, okay, there's more digital effects. Yeah, I noticed there's much more digital effects going on with backgrounds and like, I don't know, things like raindrops on a window will be CG and stuff like that. Excuse me, something like that. It looks like there's more use of CG with like there's a couple shots that are noticeably CGI. The animation style is like, I feel like it's made in Flash. I wouldn't be surprised if this was Flash. Well, it wouldn't be Flash now. I don't know what it would be made in. Toon Boom? Because you can see there's like a little like, there's like a little too much interpolation. You know what I mean? Which I find a little distracting, but I guess it's just a stylistic thing, or just how the show looks. It's fine. Yeah, I'll talk about the rest next week. You know what I'm going to talk about the entirety of right now is Scott Pilgrim versus the World, because I read the whole thing today. Well, technically yesterday as well. Read it in about 2 days. It is doesn't take that long. So why am I reading this? Well, My history with Scott Pilgrim. Let's see. It's always been a movie that people have referenced that I've known of for years. I've seen so many random little clips. Not quite a Pulp Fiction situation where I feel like I know the whole thing, but I just know vaguely enough about it. So, when I started dating Kat, about 4 weeks into us dating, which was so... she messages me on Discord, and she goes, I need you to get into a call right now. And I was like, okay. And I get into a call, and she's like, we have to watch Scott Pilgrim versus the World. And I said, okay. And so I sat in my chair on a Discord call, and I watched Scott Pilgrim in 480p through a pirate website over a Discord stream where Katrina's oversensitive Chromebook microphone kept picking up cars driving past in the background. You know, the way that the movie was meant to be seen. The way that David Lynch would want me to watch his movie. So, I mean, I did see it. I did watch the movie. It's not like I watched it on a plane or anything. And, I remember enjoying the film. It's not the optimal viewing experience, obviously. And it's so weird, because, like, our 4th date, which was, like, later that week, I went over to her house, and she owns the movie. But for some reason, she couldn't have just waited, like, 3 days for me to go over. And I don't know why. It was so pressing to her that she needed to establish Scott Pilgrim versus the World early in our relationship. It was very important to her. And I remember liking the film. Yeah, I liked it. It wasn't one of those things. I could definitely see why someone would watch it and it would be really big to them. I think I was already at a point 2 years ago where I'd seen enough formative media that, like, watching it was like, oh, that's cool, as opposed to, holy shit, this is the craziest thing. I've never seen anything like this. Because Scott Pilgrim, so it's very important to Katrina. It's like a big thing to her. I think it's like her favorite movie. It's like one of her favorite things overall. I always... Side story. I remember asking her one time in conversation. I was like, hey, so, like, when did you... I forget what I asked first. I was like... I definitely asked her when she realized she was trans first. And she goes, back in, like, 2017. And I was like, really? Huh. And then I thought about it for a second. I'm like, when did you watch Scott Pilgrim? And she said, I think like 3 or 4 months after that. And I was like, are you really? And for some reason, I had just assumed that she had watched that movie years before she came out. And the fact that it was the reverse made way less sense to me for some reason. And I think I said, wow. I think my exact words were, wow, imagine becoming a woman just in time to be ruined by Ramona Flowers. And I'm reusing that joke now because I think it was funny and she laughed at it and it made me feel good that she laughed at a joke that I made. She loves Ramona Flowers. She owns the fucking bag. I think she had one and then it got stained and I think she replaced it with another one. Babe, I could just text her. She replaced it. Or did she make one? Did she make did she make one herself? She has the Ramona Flowers bag with the star on it, right? She's cosplayed the character before. I don't know. She loves Scott Pilgrim versus the World. She frequently compares me to Scott Pilgrim because I'm a nerdy, I guess, skinny white guy. And Um, honestly, for a while I took a comparison to Scott Pilgrim as being an insult. I don't know if I do after I read the comic. So it's always been this thing, and I've always been like, okay, yeah, that's her thing. And I figured because I watched the movie, it was, I've covered that base with her. But you might have heard somewhat recently that there was an announcement that there's going to be, I believe, also a Netflix animated series, an animated adaptation of the comic book. And they're getting the entire voice cast back. They're getting the entire, not voice cast, but the entire cast from the film back to reprise their roles. And I believe Anna Monoguchi, who did the music for the video game, is also, and maybe some for the movie, I'm not sure, is also doing soundtrack. And apparently this is something that like everyone's wanted for a really long time. When I say everyone, I mean like the entire cast and what's his name? Brian Lee O'Malley, the author, have wanted for a really long time, was an animated full adaptation. And obviously she's going to make me watch it. And I figured, you know what? I'm interested. She owns the entire comic, graphic novel, whatever series. It's like 6 volumes. She owns all of them. So I borrowed them. And it took me like 2 days to read. I finally got around to it. And yeah, I took the Scott pilgrimage, as I call it. And I really liked it. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was great, actually. It took me, I think, 1 volume. It took me by the end of volume 2, I think I understood what it was doing. When I sort of anticipated that when I read the comic, I almost said manga, like a fucking dork, like a loser. I was kind of anticipating that when I read the comic, it would make me like the film less. And for a while it did, and by the end it didn't. It took me, I actually was feeling a little bit of friction with the story until the end of the 2nd volume, and then I think I understood what was going on, like what it was going for, if that makes sense. So if you don't know anything about Scott Pilgrim versus the World, which I would find surprising, but I'll just quickly summarize it in brief. It was a graphic novel series written, I think the first one came out in like 2004. It came out between 2004 and 2007. And it's about this guy. How do I even describe what it's about? Because there's a lot of stuff that happens. The basic premise, the pitch, is that it's a guy named Scott Pilgrim who's like the world's biggest fucking loser. He lives in Toronto, Canada. And he's 23 years old, and when the story begins, he's dating a high schooler. He's dating a 17-year-old girl named Knives Chow. That's just her name. And he's in a band. He's in like a shitty rock band. They're not shitty. They're the greatest thing in the world. And when all of a sudden, he kind of gets snapped out of this sort of stupor he's in, and kind of into a new one, when he runs into this girl, Ramona Flowers, who is this incredibly mysterious delivery girl for Amazon, for Amazon.com, which in 2004 was like a book site that also like maybe sold CDs or so. It was like a Barnes & Noble online back at that time. And it's really funny because they keep the name Amazon, but they have like legally distinct names for other stuff, and it's kind of funny because I don't know if you could do that today. So he's trying to get with Ramona, but before he can do that, like they're sort of like dating, but before he can she can like fully date him, I guess, he has to defeat her 7 evil exes. She has a lot of they say ex-boyfriends, but she insists on exes, not being gender specific, and that's a setup for a thing. and all of these they're like in a league. All of her ex-partners are in a league together, and they show up and they're gonna fight Scott Pilgrim. It's like No More Heroes. Wait, hang on. What else were we talking about that I said this is a lot like No More Heroes? And then she said that one of her friends said that Scott Pilgrim was a lot like No More Heroes. What were we were watching something like that. We encountered something along those lines, but I can't remember. Anyway, that's the plot, and it's a zany, kind of absurd story with a lot of fourth wall breaking and very conversational, kind of dry humor dialogue, and tons of little references to stuff like video games and pop culture and stuff like that. Honestly, which is aged pretty well, I have to say. And it's very much entrenched in the Toronto 20-something going to parties scene in 2005. So that's like the basic premise. And now from here on out, I'm gonna just spoil fucking everything. That's what I do here. So the first like volume or two, I was a little like, okay, I was using the movie as sort of a frame of reference for the comic because well, it's what I've seen, obviously. And I was curious what was different and what was changed. When I talk about friction, they have very different feelings. I think what I've realized, I've had a bit of time today. I've had a couple hours to digest the story now. The movie and the comic are kind of like two different stories. Like, they have the same characters for the most part. They follow a lot of the same. The movie pulls a lot of things from the comic. And a lot of things are similar, and okay, I see how they took that and they work that in here, and some things are combined into this scene and all that. But really, like, they're different stories about different things, and the mediums drastically affect, I think, the experience of consuming both of them. So, for instance, when I talk about friction, the first volume is very much like we're grounded in reality. There's a little bit of like, huh? What? Huh? And you're like, maybe some stuff is just sort of allegoric or symbolic, like the way that Ramona kind of like seems to roller skate like through reality, like teleport and stuff. And you're just like, okay, just some weird stuff. And then by the end, when the first fight with the first ex, Matthew, happens, it goes into like craziness. Like the story stops taking place in the real world. And it was very strange to me. Funny enough, even having seen the movie and knowing that it had this kind of tone, reading the comic, it was very jarring. Where it's like, all of a sudden there's this guy who pops in and he has magic powers and he's shooting laser beams out of his hands. And all of a sudden Scott has these superhuman fighting abilities. And characters are just like, he's referencing like he what is it? He summons demon hipster chicks. And you're like, what? That throw fireballs? And then Scott, all of a sudden all the characters who are like up in the rafters at this like concert venue are suddenly down on the stage. You're like, what the fuck is happening? What is going on? And it feels really weird and like, what is it? And then by the end of the second volume, I kind of got the idea. So the story, in the world of Scott Pilgrim, the world feels very much, and like the events that happened feel like they're shaped by the characters' emotions and their story arcs, rather than the state of the world or the characters affecting each other's art. Does that make sense? Does that make sense? Things happen in the story not because they necessarily make sense. There's never any kind... It's not like a real world. It doesn't really take place in the real world entirely. Which is a feeling that gets stronger, I think, as the book goes on. Which I think improves this a little bit. This sort of jarring quality a little bit. It's like... How do I say this? So, like... Okay, here's an example. So the second fight that happens with Lucas Lee, the actor guy, it's like... It's like, okay, they are scheduled to fight. I've already accepted the basic premise that Scott has to go fight these guys. So they're scheduled to fight, and, like, they just kind of show up. They just sort of show up, and Lucas is, like, sitting on a bench smoking or something, and he's like, "Oh, hi, I'm Scott Pilgrim. Are you Lucas Lee?" Excuse me. And then they're next to this, like, 100-year-old castle that's been in Toronto for, like, a generation. And Lucas is like, "Oh yeah, you like Scott Pilgrim?" And then he just picks him up and he spins him around and he flings him into the castle and, like, destroys the wall. And then Scott walks out and he's like, "Fuck, okay, that's cool. Can we take, like, a breather?" And Lucas is like, "Yeah, that's cool." And then they just sort of sit down, and all the characters are just sitting down, like Scott's friends and Lucas. They were just sitting down and chatting about, like, random shit. And then they, like, resume the fight. And you're like, what? Like, none of this makes fucking sense. And then I kind of realized, oh, it's not supposed to. Like, if you get hung up... So I think this was I think the movie primed me the wrong way to think about the story. Going into the comic. Because the film has to have these 7 fights, it has to kind of structure itself around these fights, and it has to present them in a way that at least makes some sort of logical sense, because it's like a film with things happening in sequential sequence, right? In forward. And it has to, like, make sense on screen for an audience. And there's some parts, so, like, the absurdism is absolutely in the film, but it's in the presentation. It's more so in the presentation. Like, and the thing is, I think that establishes that. That's why I didn't have as much friction with the weirdness in the movie. It's so weird. It's like this very minute, slight difference, but I think it was a big deal for the way that I experienced both of these things. So in the film, immediately, like, you get that shot when they do the title drop, where Knives is listening to Scott's band, Sex Bomb, and they built, like, this set. She's just, like, in front of them on a couch, right? Like, 5 feet away. But they built this whole set just for this one shot to do the title drop, where it's like this living room has suddenly stretched to be 20 feet long. And you get this slow pan out, so you can get all the title sequence on the ground and all that. And immediately you're like, okay, things are a little wacky, and the things that I'm going to see are more like to sell an idea and to sell a tone and a mood. And an aesthetic, right? So that is, like, very quickly established. In the book, that only really starts happening. Like, the presentation is sort of funky, like the panel layout or the dialogue, and there'll be little jokes and stuff, but that just seems like it's different. It's different because, I don't know, it feels more like there's less upfront absurdity at the start of the comic, right? And you have to kind of work your way into it. And I realized eventually that, characters will, like in that fight with Lucas, characters will just do shit. They'll just do random stuff. Well, not like random, but seemingly unmotivated things. Because, like, within, like, say, these fights, right? And at a certain point, you start to realize that, like, the fights, the story is not, it doesn't even really feel like it's about the fights. The movie is about the fights. Like, sorry, I should say the plot is about the fights in the movie. The plot is about the fights. The plot in the comic, the fights almost feel secondary or even tertiary to the things that are happening. The fights are just there. It feels like oftentimes to just be a thing that is happening in the background to move the story along by introducing some characters or some concepts. Like, the dialogue in the fights will be important, but, like, Knives is gonna jump Ramona at the, like, Toronto Public Library, and she's gonna attack her with swords, and Ramona's gonna pick up a piece of modern art, like a big metal beam, and fucking bat her around the room. And you're like, what? And it's like, yeah, because shit's just happening. They're just having a conflict. You aren't supposed to take this the most seriously in the world, that this is a thing that's really happening in reality, if that makes sense. And once I got that, I think the whole story flowed a lot better. And I was able to get really invested in it. There was a thing that I had in the film, which was more answered here, which was, why does Ramona like Scott? And it's sort of implied, maybe I should have picked up on it. Because I'm like, because it's weird, because... It's weird because... in the first time they meet... Ramona, like, doesn't want to be around him. It's, like, super awkward, and they don't want to talk to each other. And then Scott orders some CDs from Amazon, so Ramona will... because she's the only, like, delivery runner in the city. Because Amazon was very small. They're very tiny. Very teeny tiny. And so she'll show up to his door, and then he'll ask her out. Imagine you're her, like, that happens to you, and his date idea is like, let's meet up at 8:30 at night after dark in, like, the woods. Not the woods, but like the park. Like, lady, you're from New York? These are your survival skills? You're gonna get your organs stolen. What the fuck? She's stupid. But it works out, right? It works out. And for some, I'm like, why does she like him? Because she just kind of, on this date, she just kind of flips to liking him. And it seems kind of out of nowhere. Where it seemed like before she was just sort of begrudgingly letting him speak. When he was, like, asking her out. And it's kind of a mystery in and of itself. Ramona is like a mysterious person, and that's a big part of her character. I think I like the characters more in the comic, because they have a lot more time to, I don't know, just talk about themselves, or avoid talking about themselves, which is kind of like a key plot point. The movie cuts a lot of stuff out. If you've only seen the movie, it cuts a lot of stuff out. The first maybe 3 volumes are roughly like, okay, yeah, I remember this from the movie, I remember this. And then after that, it steadily starts diverging to the point where I was like, wow, this is a totally different story. And I found a lot of things really interesting about it. I think I got Scott's characterization a little better in the comic. At least I picked up on it a little more. So there's this immediate thing of, like, Scott Pilgrim is a child groomer because he's going out with a 17-year-old. And weirdly enough, none of his friends, who all seem like relatively more responsible adults, seem to be really concerned about this, besides telling him he just has to break up with her. I would be very alarmed if that was happening to, like, someone I knew was I'd be like, sorry, what? That's kind of weird. Like, I would probably have a big problem with that if I knew someone who was 23 and they were going out with a 17-year-old who's still in high school. And then you kind of realize, with just some, like, a couple sort of almost in passing, dialogue in passing, that, like, the reason no one's very alarmed is that everyone knows Scott is such a toothless coward that he couldn't even bring himself to molest her. like, he just rides the bus and sometimes maybe will hold her hand. And he will never do anything with her because he's way too spineless. Ramona, I found more, I liked her more, again, just because you get to see more of her. I really enjoyed how laid back the comic is. And you lose a lot of that in the film because it has to fit 7 fights in there. And they get some of that, like, they fit in some characterization. Like, they do the best they can, I think, to fit that whole story into a film. But, like, man, it's just like nice. It's kind of pleasant because you spend most of the story just like kind of hanging out. People going back and forth. Someone says this to someone. They have a conversation about that. This thing develops over here. And, they go on a date. Like, the fight with Todd is so funny. Talk about, like, the fights just kind of being, like, almost secondary. They have to, like, reschedule the fight, like, 3 times. Because something, like, just keeps happening. And, like, it's not working out. And eventually they have to, like... can we... dude, I'm, like, really tuckered out. Like, we all kind of want to go home. You feel like Friday night or something? They're like, oh, yeah, we can show up then. And then they'll just show up. And then, like, in the interim between the fights, Scott and Ramona will go on a date or they'll have breakfast and, they'll get a scene with, like, Kim talking to Steven or something like that. And it's so chilled out and the characters are so likable and the dialogue is really really well paced. Everyone has a lot of personality. All the characters end up just being very, very likable for that reason. Like, I felt invested in them. Even the ones who are, like, ostensibly bad people or have a ton of flaws, I like following them as characters. Like, you kind of start to realize that, like, Ramona has a ton of problems of her own. She's just, like, way more mysterious about it. I don't want to talk about that yet. I don't know. I really liked, once they were dating, I was like, I like this. I like this feel and this vibe that is occasionally interrupted by violence. What do I want to talk about? Because there is a lot of stuff that interested me. I really enjoyed the new stuff that took me by surprise. Okay. So... when I talk about the film and the comic being different stories, what I mean is the movie has to... There's many points in the comic where they will suddenly cut to, like, a backstory or, like, a memory, right? A flashback to someone's past and something like that, and it might only be for, like, a couple pages, and it's a comic book, so, like, 3 pages with no, like, very little dialogue goes by very quickly, and it just, like, reading wise, it's just like that. You just kind of flip through it, but it's like this information that is just consistently sprinkled throughout. But it's like in a film, you don't have that luxury. Like, it's way more work to include that stuff, and it would beef up the movie a lot. It would beef it up a lot. And you would kind of have to include characters like Lisa, who is not in the film at all. And I found very interesting. Her part of the story, it's like this character that they set up, and it's like, oh, it's Scott's, like, childhood friend, and she's back in town. And I'm like, okay, this is probably... When she shows back up, I was like, okay, something's gonna happen here. Because Scott's acting kind of weird. And it feels weird for the both of them in some way. Like, if there was nothing there, you're like, alright, he wouldn't be having this reaction. But it's like all that stuff and where it leads and this whole kind of tumultuous situation. There's a lot of points in the comic where it feels like, man, stuff just is fucking really feels like it's in the shitter right now. Like, you'll just cut to someone and, like, someone's just mad at somebody all of a sudden, and you're like, and someone at, like, what's wrong with that? And then they just explain off off panel, that person had like done something shitty to them, and you're like, oh, that like sucks. It sucks. But I really liked the Lisa stuff, and I think that contributed a lot. Okay, so, fuck. I keep getting split around because there's a lot to talk about, because I'm also like comparing it a lot to the movie. So, like, in a broad sense, I should say this stuff first to establish this first. In a broad sense, a lot of the stuff that they cut is like, okay, I totally get why you didn't have all this flashback stuff, because it kind of requires you to include way more. Like, if you're going to include the memories, you're going to have to include, like, this entire other character and arc and stuff like that. And you just don't have the fucking time. And probably other stuff on top of that. If I, like, if I had my head wrapped around the story a little better, I could probably... There might even be other stuff that's set up with those scenes, right? Those flashbacks. However, cutting that stuff out, that stuff is like integral, very integral to the message of the comic. Like, around the halfway point, it really starts to diverge in terms of what the story is. And it's slightly different, but it's like an important difference. There's a nuance. They rework the moral of the story. Excuse me, Jesus. They rework the moral in the movie to have it fit the story that's the plot that's left over, the story that's left over when you cut all that stuff out. In the movie, so like in the movie at the end, right? Like fucking, it's funny because like, man, the finale is like completely different in the comic. Even though it's like the same location and it's basically the same characters, completely different. I was like, wow, this is absolutely not what I remember from the film. And that was kind of fun because I was ready to be surprised. It's not just like, oh, I'm just going to read a straight adaptation. So in the movie, in that final battle with Gideon, Scott, the thing is like, okay, his final development is he gets the power of love. That's his power up. And then Gideon shatters that, and Scott earns the power, the power of self-respect. That's what it is, which is pretty funny. And ultimately, that's what lets him defeat Gideon. And I like the idea that Scott's character arc in the film is Scott Pilgrim is this loser who is essentially, how do I describe it? He thinks that he needs his life to be saved by some girl, which is Ramona. And ultimately he realizes that he had it inside of himself the whole time. And that even if he would have lost Ramona, he's going to do it because whatever. Because he wants to do it and he believes that he can do it. So, and he gains self-respect. In the comic, Scott earns the power of love like halfway through the story. And then loses that in the fight with Gideon. Ramona picks up the power of love, and Scott gains the power of understanding. And that is a very it might not seem that different, but it really affects what the story is about. Scott in the comics, his arc is about him. His problem is that he's a fucking coward. He's a coward and he can't fucking... He's in a state of arrested development. That's why he's dating a fucking high schooler. Because he like never mentally progressed past being a high schooler. And that feels like safe and comfortable to him to be able to listen to Knives talk about stupid high school drama. because it's like a fake world that he gets to live in. And he hates being in the real world where he has like a shitty tiny apartment and no job and no independence, and he's basically chained to Wallace, who's the best character. Fucking love Wallace. And all of this is rooted in this and I like how there's no like deep backstory or trauma that I could tell. It's just the way he is. He just can't fucking man up. He just can't be a fucking adult and face consequences or the real world. He's in a perpetual kind of childlike denial about the real world. And this knock-on effect causes him to be very self-centered. He's very self-serving and greedy in the story. The way that he doesn't want to break up with Knives because that's hard, right? It's hard and it's scary, and he's too much of a pussy to confront her, right? And then he does, and that is like a character development moment fairly early on. That's sort of like the point of no return, I guess. He does confront her, but he's so apprehensive about it. I lost my train of thought. And that becomes a plot point later on that's fairly important, that Scott technically was cheating on the both of them at the same time. He was two-timing. And that's kind of distressing for Knives and Ramona. And if you can't break up, if you like someone else, you should just be an adult and break up with them. Sorry, if you're dating someone you like someone else, just be an adult and break up with them. And just cut it off and start clean. Do not fuck around. It's not good. It leads to the other person jumping your new partner in a public library with knives. There's this recurring thing in the comic, which is alluded to, and then it really becomes important in the last, I want to say 2 volumes, which is that Ramona's head glows. Completely absent in the movie. And eventually what is revealed, what the glow is, I thought it was going to be the mind control thing from the movie. No, that is completely original to the film. Again, the whole setup and context of the finale is entirely different between both of them. The glow, which Scott also experiences at key moments later in the story, what the glow is what Gideon refers to as internal emotional warfare. It's essentially it's a visible manifestation of someone being completely locked inside of their own head. And that's completely Scott and Ramona. Scott knows almost nothing about Ramona, and they point it out, and throughout, everything about her is unknown, and that's kind of what attracts him to her. She's so mysterious. She's from America. But he tries to ask her a question one time. He tries to ask her how old she is, which should be, for 2 young people, should be the least crazy question ever. And she can't tell him because she doesn't want to talk about it. Because Ramona is trapped in her own head because of Gideon. She's trapped in her own self. She and Scott have the same problem. They have the exact same problem. And this causes them to do kind of shitty things to people. And I really like the moment when he's fighting Gideon, and Envy comes up after Gideon's been beaten, and she's trying to ask him if he's okay, and he says something very callous to her. He says shut up, I don't fucking need you. And it's this just very callous response to someone who genuinely is showing some care for him. And Scott has this moment where he realizes, wait. And they don't spell it out. You have to intuit what he's realizing. He's wait. And you get these flashbacks to all of these other points in the story, many of which have been in these flashback segments, which is why this whole part isn't in the movie, where characters have done things that were kind of uncool or very cold or standoffish. Like, Scott didn't tell, Scott was dating, he was dating Kim in, like, high school and didn't tell her that he was moving. And she's like, what the fuck, dude? He had to tell Lisa, who's his totally not girlfriend, best friend. And then Lisa told her. And it's like other moments in the story where characters have said things and done things, and you realize, holy shit, all of these have been because of the same root problem, is because they can't be fucking adults. They can't just do the scary thing and either do something kind of unpleasant or accept someone else, right? Ramona, like, can't accept people. That's why she always, like, the reason she has this horrible taste in men, which they bring up, and it's very much like a character flaw of her. She has terrible taste in men. Partners, sorry, because Roxy's there. She dates all these assholes, and they're like, it's kind of weird, like, that you just kind of attract terrible people into your life. And it's because, like, she cannot, like, what is it? How would I describe it? Well, she unlocks the power of love at the end of the story, right? So I think it's kind of implied that her problem is, number one, she's stuck in her own head, and the effect that has on her. Whereas for Scott, it's almost like he's stuck in this, that causes him to be very cowardly and stuck in this naive world view, afraid of confrontation, and being very self-centered. I mean, it's called Scott Pilgrim versus the world. You know? For Ramona, it kind of results in her, like, being completely unable to, like, connect to other people. Like, to open herself up. In that way, she's almost also kind of self-serving. Like, how much is she actually I felt like in the movie, I remember, before they do the mind control reveal thing, when Ramona is, like, basically breaking up with Scott, I was like, are you fucking kidding me? How much goddamn work this guy has gone through to win you over, how much fucking trouble you are, and he's still doing this, he's still going at it, and you're gonna walk out on him. And then there's the mind control thing, and you're like, okay, all right. And in the comic, it makes more sense, because it's like, it's almost like she's scared to open up to him. It's like a very one-way relationship where Scott, like, there's these scenes of Scott just fucking talking her ear off about whatever nerdy shit he's into. I can't relate to that at all. I don't know anyone in my life who would be able to relate to that either. Sometimes I see Kat's eyes glaze over, and it looks like she's going to fall asleep, and then I'm like, okay, I should stop. It's an extreme, like, she's basically just Scott is actually putting way more effort into the relationship than she is. Because she can't. She's so scared to, like, invest herself into anyone decent. And that bites her in the ass. With this whole predicament they've gotten themselves into. So her, like, unlocking the power of love is now she can, like, actively open herself up to other people. And then she tells him how old she is. And it's, like, the least controversial thing. She's like 24. She's 24. Oh, okay, it's not a big deal. Like, that's the same reason she always feels the need to, like, change up her appearance. She dyes her hair. She gets a haircut. She's wearing all these different outfits. It's like she can't, I don't know. She's completely in her own world. Oh, the Negascott thing. You gotta be careful around that word. The Negascott. The Negascott. Completely different in the comic. I was very surprised. in the movie, it's almost like a one-off thing, like a little bit joke, where Nega Scott is like ironically like a cool dude, and they just kind of talk things out in private. And it's just sort of a joke that they gloss over. In the comic, it's like a key turning point in the story, and Nega Scott represents all of essentially Scott's baggage that he has to not fight but embrace. Oh my god, it's Bleach. Wait a second. Wait. Hang on. Wait. Isn't the power of understanding just Zangetsu? I'm pretty sure it's just Zangetsu from Bleach. It's like the giant, like, meat cleaver sword that Ichigo has with, like, the bandage wrapped hilt, the handle, and no, like, hand guard. It's basically just Zangetsu. Wait. When? Is that like legitimately a Bleach? That's like a thing that fucking has to happen in Bleach, when Ichigo has to. No, wait. Am I confusing that with something? Maybe I'm totally misremembering this. No. The fucking inner hollow. Hang on, I'm totally confusing this. In Bleach, Ichigo's inner hollow is like a thing that's actively trying to kill him. He doesn't have to embrace it. He has to fucking kill it. Well, eventually, I don't know. No, he doesn't kill it. Eventually, he like just kind of lets it chill out. It's like part of his character development. So those are kind of what happens in Scott Pilgrim. Although that was written way before that happened in Bleach. So I'm actually just completely making shit up right now. Anyway, it represents all of Scott's baggage and all this stuff that he had to. He's basically tucked away and forgotten about safely in his safe little world, right? In his precious little life. And then he has to like accept that. He has to accept his shadow, his literal shadow. I thought that was, and that gives him like the result and like a new outlook to go and fight Gideon. I like that a lot. Scott and Ramona ending up together in the okay, so his arc in the comic is that again he's complete, like I said, he's in his own head. He's totally self-centered and greedy and cowardly. And he's just completely spineless and toothless. How many synonyms can I come up with? And then he learns, when he gets the power of understanding, it's not self-respect. And it's not self-understanding in the comic. It's just understanding. It's that for the one time, he truly breaks out of his own head and he actually understands. Gideon's the guy he hates like the most in the entire world. He hates this guy to the most ever. But he understands him, and he's actually able to kind of empathize with him in a way. Not to the point where he thinks he's correct at all, because Gideon is obviously wrong. He's a total piece of shit. But he's able to empathize with him, and that is like a power. Oh, shit. I'm going to take all the stuff, now that I've accepted all of the things and negative stuff in my life that I've done or that's happened to me. I can use all of that information and look at this guy and see how there's like a common thread to all of this stuff and actually recognize the error of my own ways. And I can improve as a person. And that's like his final character development. And I think it makes I was always a little iffy on them ending up together in the movie. I feel like the moral with the movie, it almost would have been driven home a lot better if Scott decided that he wanted to just be on his own, which is basically what Knives does in the comic. If he just wanted to be on his own and just like, you know what? This made me a better person. I think I can be single. But, you know, they gotta end up together, whatever. I think it would have been more of a mature take on it to not have them end up together, but whatever, fucking whatever. Them in the comic makes a lot more sense. Number one, you spent a lot of time seeing kind of what they like about each other. And then once they both have this final bit of development, Ramona, I almost said Romola. Romola flowers. Oh no. No. Cow Lady Gaming. Fuck. When Ramona gains the power of love, it's like, okay, they've both learned to get outside of themselves and stop being so self-centered. Well, with Ramona, it was a little more like not entirely her choice, but it was like, okay, this is like a problem she's had and she's overcome it, and now she can actually kind of extend out to other people. She can actually love Scott, like, truly, and like actually give herself to him in a way that she wasn't able to before. And now Scott can get out of his own head and understand the people around him. And you're like, okay, now I feel like the relationship can work out. It like, when I say that the fights are very almost secondary, it's like you're watching the evolution of, really, it's like a romance. It really is a love story. It's kind of corny, I feel like, to say, I thought it was this thing, but really, it was a love story. But really, this is. I think that really applies here. When I think about it, the story that's happening is you're watching a relationship from roughly the beginning to not the end, but oh my god, it's like before. You're watching it develop and hit a bunch of bumps, and the fights are just kind of like a thing that's happening on the side to explore, because Ramona is never going to open up about herself of her own accord. So how do you do that? You have these other characters who know her intimately on some level and fill in her backstory. Ramona never gets to tell her own story because she feels like she can't, and she's almost scared to tell her own story. So other people have to tell it for her. And by the end of the story, this relationship you've been watching has almost like they figured it out. They went through this rocky period, and then by overcoming these similar obstacles and having these, you know, a lot of trials and tribulations, I really liked. So they have this fight where, what is it? It's Ramona. It's like around the midway point, going into like it kind of is the transition into the third real act of this plot, where I think it's Ramona's mad at Scott because he was two-timing her with knives, and he wasn't fucking man enough to break up with his fake high school girlfriend. And so she like kicks him out, and he's feeling he doesn't have anywhere to go because he was living with her. Because I think it's like him and Wallace, they didn't sign a new lease, and he moved in with Ramona, and Wallace moved in with this random like French guy he met. And Wallace is just always fucking different guys. You know what I love? I love how Wallace never calls himself gay. It's only the other characters who call him gay. I mean, he is gay, obviously, but it's the other characters who announce that he's gay, and they're the ones who insist upon it. I think that's really funny. Wallace himself never really brings up, like, he doesn't be like, yeah, I'm so gay, I'm super gay. Obviously, he's doing extremely gay things, but everyone else is like, yeah, this is Wallace, he's like mondo gay. I think that's really funny. What was I talking about? Yeah, and then Scott goes over because Lisa's back in town. And he goes over, and there's like this weird emotional moment where they're talking and she's like, they're talking about how they, I always kind of had feelings for you. Dude, I fucking really love the moment where things are getting kind of nutty, right? When they're having this conversation. And she asks him, like, do you think that, like, he's like, yeah, no, but, like, we never did anything. Like, we were never actually dating or going out or, you know, it wasn't, like, a full relationship. And she asks him, like, well, do you think we should have? And there's, like, a moment of silence. And I was like, oh. And then the next thing, it's this fucking, like, the entire page is just her sitting there and she's staring at him and she says, do you think we should? And I was like, you can't see me right now. I'm leaning forward and my eyes are huge. I was like, oh my God. This is like that moment in Before Midnight. That's a good romance, you know? I feel like that's a good romance. Where there's a point where I legitimately, like, someone says something and I go, no, come, don't do this. No. And then I really liked how it ended up with Scott waking up the next morning and you're like, oh God, oh no. And then she tells him, yeah, no, we didn't do anything. You don't remember this? And he's like, no. I think it's so funny that, like, he doesn't drink. He just completely forgot. He just blacked out. That he completely rejected her advance. And she was like, okay, whatever. And then they just, like, got food. And I was like, that's a nice moment for Scott as a character. Like a test of his character. I like that. That I felt like was a really nice turning point where he's put in this kind of ultimatum situation. Like, he really has nowhere to go. He can't run anywhere else unless he just wants to walk the streets all night. Like a whore. So he's kind of just stuck here, and he has to give a yes or no. And ultimately, like, he's finally forced into a situation where he has to be an adult, and he has to make a decision. And he actually makes the mature decision, and you're like, oh shit. He's, like, kind of changing for the better. I appreciate that a lot. All the comparisons to fucking Scott. Kat always makes these comparisons to, like, oh my God. Especially when we were first going out and she was learning all this stuff was new to her about me. Like, I was reading along and I'm like, oh my God, this sounds like something she says about me. Like, Ramona will describe Scott in a way, I'm like, that's how fucking Kat talks about me. And then I find it's like, there's a moment where, like, it's the first time Scott says that, like, he doesn't drink, and I was like, God fucking damn it. And I sent that to her, and I'm like, when you found out I don't drink, were you, like, secretly super hyped because it made me more like Scott Pilgrim? What did she say? I gotta look at what this piece of shit said. I can go. I'm literally gonna look up what she said. She said, yeah, I creamed and said, oh, he's just like the Cellar plus R for real. This is how we talk to each other all the time. It's awful. There's this fucking panel. Oh my God. There's this panel, I want to say in volume 4 at the beginning, when they're having, like, a nice moment. They're like at someone's birthday party or something. And it's this cute moment, and they're eating together on a bench by themselves, and Ramona says, you know, Scott, I think you're the nicest guy I've ever dated. And he says, that's kind of sad. Because he really is. Especially at that point in the story. And fucking Kat sent me that panel before. Like, she sent me that page before. That series of panels. And then you fucking know what? I know you're listening to this, Lozy. Lozy fucking took that page and edited it so she's saying Tigan instead of Scott, and he added the both of us. And I was like, oh my fucking God. And she was so excited. She was, oh my God. Oh my God. She was so fucking excited when she saw that. And I got to the page and I was like, oh my god, it's the page. It's that page. I think she said that same line to me before, and I said something very similar. No, I probably said something really arrogant. I was like, yeah, because I'm fucking awesome. Because I'm not a bitch like Scott Pilgrim. Other stuff I liked about it. I don't know. I love the pacing. I love how much time you just get with the characters to chill out. And just, it's all so interesting. I mentioned it before, but it's really cool. It was really cool to read this story where it feels like, because you're usually just with Scott, and you're usually only seeing, what's happening to him. You get some cutaways to other characters, but for the most part, you're just getting him. And it's like it's neat to be reading the story, and then like you pop in somewhere, you see someone, and something's happened, there's been some development on the site. It feels like a very lively, very active world. You think about, these stories like The Lord of the Rings, where there's so much time and effort put into building up a real history and a mythos and tons of different characters and regions and areas and locations, and those are all synonyms and characters and things and people and concepts that are important. And it really comes across like Middle Earth could be a real place. And I'm reading this and I'm like, this really feels like Toronto could be a real place. And thank God it's not. Thank God it's not real. But what if it was? It's really selling me that this is an actual location that exists. Yeah, I don't know. I enjoyed this a lot. I'm actually very curious, and actually I'm excited. I would go so far as to say I'm excited to watch the actual animated series, because I want to see how it's adapted. I'm curious how the absurdism is presented in animation as opposed to live action or in the comic book. I'm curious. It's funny because I was rewatching some scenes from the movie and I was like, man, a lot of this is different. A lot of the scenes are switched around, but there's so many jokes in the movie that are fucking great. Excuse me. There's a lot of that's just a funny movie. Like, it's a really, really funny movie. It's an Edgar Wright film, so it's to be expected. Man, that is like, it's such a perfect fit for his style, because he really gets to go all out with like the other, like all of his other movies. I've seen like a couple of his other films, and for the most part, he has a very, very recognizable style, but this is such a perfect fit for it, because usually it comes out in like the editing and the dialogue and stuff like that, and maybe sometimes the script, but this is like the whole thing. Like the dialogue and the editing are extremely unique, and just the presentation with all of the little gags, the visual stuff happening, the effects, which I think have actually aged pretty well because they're intentionally very stylized. So I think it works. Yeah, I think it works pretty well. Even though it's from 2010, I think the effects in that movie hold up. Such a perfect fit, and all these new jokes he's written in it's man, that is a very enjoyable movie. But I would say that I kind of like the fact that they're different experiences. Because you were never going to fit, having read the comic, you were never going to fit all of that into a movie. You did, maybe like 2 movies, 3 movies, maybe. A full, like, series makes way more sense. You hear like, oh, they're doing an anime. Oh, yeah, that's like a no-brainer, dude. How has this not happened before? But for what it's doing, it's good, and in the things that it has to cut, it provides a different kind of story, and I think I like that. I like that they're different experiences, because I was able to go to because they have a lot of the same stuff. They have a similar vibe, and I think the tone is very much preserved in what they can do. You lose a lot of the slice of life elements, but they preserve a lot of the wackiness and the sense of humor and the basic character arcs, right? You're gonna get all of that out of the movie. But it's kind of cool to be able to go to the source material, and it feels like it's worth reading on its own, you know? I don't know if I really like the idea, or I don't know if I agree with the idea that an adaptation... I feel like in many cases, it's almost like an adaptation renders the original work, especially when you go from like comic to screen, you know, kind of like renders it obsolete. Like you get that, I feel like with a lot of anime, like, is there really a point to reading the manga? Unless the manga literally stops unless the anime literally stops before the manga finishes. I like the adaptation, the idea of an adaptation which is preserving most of the original, but providing a different kind of experience. And I'm trying to think of similar instances where that happened. I remember, like, part 5 of JoJo's, there's, like, some new content, like, there's new scenes and stuff. And the new scenes that they added are, like, great. Like, they feel like they were... If I hadn't already read the manga, I wouldn't have even known. It doesn't feel like filler. It feels completely natural. Like something that would have been in the original. And that stuff's great. Leave a comment down below if you have an instance of like an adaptation that really feels like a different... like good, but is a different experience. I think that would be an interesting topic. I really enjoyed the comic. I see why this is one of my beloved's favorite things. I get it now. I think it's really funny that there's this like Manic Pixie Dream Girl thing, and Ramona Flowers is kind of like the poster Manic Pixie Dream Girl for that, because like honestly, like reading the story, she doesn't really fit. She fits the stereotype until you realize that it's like a character flaw. Like, the point of the story is that it's kind of not a good or healthy thing for her. It's actually kind of destructive, and it creates a ton of problems in her life. And for Scott, the idea that some girl is going to fall out of the sky and change your entire world and make you a better person is also a misconception. In some way, like, yeah, his involvement with her does make him a better person, but really, he has to figure all that shit out on his own. Like, his real character development, like the big character development stuff, most of that happens when he's alone, when he's by himself, or that whole segment when after Kim moves away and he goes to visit her in Montreal, I think. All that stuff was great, and when that's where the Negascott thing happens, and all that is like, this is a dumb worldview. You do not want to be like the stereotypes that people have of these characters. Yeah. Man, my voice is tired. I've been going for over 2 hours. I'm going to call it a day there. If you have enjoyed this, then thank you so much for listening to me ramble, if you listened that far. If you have a question, feel free to leave it down in the comments below, but please phrase it in the form of a question, because I'm not just going to read your thoughts out loud. Thanks for 5K subs on the main channel. I adore the support. Expect a video, God, I hope soon. Makes me feel like a lazy piece of shit, but yeah. Later.